The day is November 26, 1917. World War I is happening. The president was Woodrow Wilson. You are on a date with a lovely girl, and then all of a sudden, a thought comes to you. Let's watch a hockey game. What's hockey? Find out in this History of the NHL documentary. The NHL, or National Hockey Association, was founded in 1917, which was previously built from the ashes of the National Hockey Association. But in its first 5 seasons, they were everything but smooth sailing. Chaos, resilience, struggle are 3 words to define the beginning of the NHL. From a deadly flu pandemic to teams folding and arenas going up in flames, this is the story of the NHL's first 5 seasons. The league began with just 4 teams: the Montreal Canadiens, the Montreal Wanderers, the Ottawa Senators, and the Toronto Arenas. Let's just say the league was a lot different at this time than it is now. The game was fast, violent, and unpredictable, and so was the world around it. But the NHL was still unpredictable. Teams changed names, relocated, and even disappeared entirely. The Toronto Arenas became the St. Patrick's, then later the Maple Leafs. The Quebec Bulldogs joined the league, only to fold after 1 season. The early NHL was survival of the fittest. The NHL didn't start as the powerhouse we know today. It was a league scrambling to stay afloat, dealing with everything from rivalries to financial struggles. And let's not forget, they were still figuring out the rules as they went along. Let's go into more detail, shall we? The 1918-19 season should have been one for the history books. The NHL's best team, the Montreal Canadiens, faced off against the Seattle Metropolitans in the Stanley Cup Final. But something more dangerous than a slap shot was sweeping across the world. The Spanish flu. Habs defenseman Joe Hall was one of many who fell victim to the flu. The disease ripped through both teams, forcing the final game to be canceled. On April 5, 1919, Joe Hall passed away, and for the first and only time in NHL history, the cup was left unawarded. This was one of the NHL's biggest what-if moments. Joe Hall was a tough, talented player, but he never got to see what his career could have been. The fact that a Stanley Cup final just stopped, that tells you how bad things were. Joe Hall passed away at the age of 37. The pandemic reminded the world, and the NHL, just how fragile life and sports can be. This could have been it for the NHL. One of its original teams was gone, and the league was barely off the ground, but hockey had already built a strong following. The fans were not going to let that die easily. It's crazy to think how an entire pandemic can bring an entire league to a stop. The Spanish flu didn't just affect everyday life. It literally changed hockey history forever. Let's just say, imagine if the 2020 Stanley Cup Finals didn't happen. They just were never played. Let that sink in real quick. As if the flu wasn't enough, the league's very foundation was unstable. On January 2nd, 1918, disaster struck. The Montreal Arena, home to the Wanderers, burned to the ground. The Wanderers, who were already struggling, couldn't recover. The team folded just 6 games into the season, marking the first and only franchise casualty in NHL history. A team folding mid-season, now that's something you don't see every day today. But back then, it was a real possibility. The NHL was on thin ice, no pun intended. The fire was just another setback in the league, and let's just say that league was barely holding on. Despite the chaos, one team emerged as the NHL's first dynasty, the Ottawa Senators. Led by superstars like Cy Denny and Clint Benedict, the Senators dominated, winning multiple Stanley Cups in the league's early years. Let's do a little deep dive, shall we, of the first NHL game in history. December 19th, 1917, the Montreal Canadiens defeat the Ottawa Senators 7-4. But not the Ottawa Senators we know today. They were also a good team back then. So once again, Canadiens defeated the Senators 7-4 with Joe Malone scoring 5 of Montreal's 7 goals on his way to finishing with 44 in 20 games. In addition to Malone, Montreal's roster included goaltender Georges Vezina and players such as Newsy Lalonde, Didier Petrie, and Jack Laviolette. Ottawa featured its own star goaltender, Clint Benedict, as well as players such as Eddie Girard, Cy Denny, and Jack Dura. All later were included and inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. The Senators trailed 3-0 after the first period, which saw Dura and Hamby Shore refuse to play until their contracts were reworked. Each took the ice during the second period after agreements were reached, but according to the Globe and Mail, it was too late to repair the damage. Speaking of Cy Denny, let's talk about his stats, shall we? Cy Denny was the league's first scoring sensation, lighting up the ice with his offensive skills. Meanwhile, goaltender Clint Benedict pioneered the modern goaltending style, even experimenting with dropping to his knees to make saves, something that would later become a fundamental part of the game. The Ottawa Senators in those early years were what the Montreal Canadiens would be later on called, a dominant force. They were definitely ahead of their time, setting the standard for future teams. It's really wild how much the game goes back to when you think about all those early innovators. They really paved the way for this league. Despite everything, the fires, the flu, the financial instability, the NHL endured. The league expanded, contracted, and fought for survival, but the game itself refused to fade away. The first 5 seasons were anything but predictable, but through the chaos, the NHL laid the groundwork for over a century of hockey history. Yes, even the game we know today. It all started with fire, disease, and sheer determination. By 1922, the NHL was still small, but it had proven its resilience. It had survived war, disease, and disaster, and in the decades to come, it would grow into one of the most powerful sports leagues in the world. But it all started here, with 5 wild seasons that nearly ended the league before it even began.